What's up, everyone? Larry here. I am simply a comedy fan chatting with and interviewing comedians, and this is Life Say Bit with Larry Mullins. Today's guest is an incredibly funny, up-and-coming comedian hailing from San Francisco, California. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Steven Steiner. Thanks again for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being flexible. So I do have, I'm just shoving this in between meetings.
That's awesome. I was like, when you said, I was like, I see what you're doing here.
Time zones. That's how we make it work.
That's cool. I like that you have that stuff on your background.
Thank you.
For anyone that will be watching it, even though I mentioned that in the outro, I pre-do them. You know what I mean? Like, I don't,
okay,
so,
cool.
So that way they'll know where to find you and all that stuff.
Sweet.
So, yeah. How are things in San Francisco? You're from San Francisco, right?
Yeah, I'm in San Francisco now. So yeah, I've been in the Bay for like 2016, so 5 years, I guess, 4.5.
Are you from there?
Originally from Seattle.
Okay, so you've been on the West Coast
most of my life. Yeah,
okay.
Originally from Seattle. I moved to Kansas City, Missouri for a couple of years. Moved to Virginia for a few years, and then moved back to the West Coast.
Oh, so you were in my state for a little bit.
What state are you in?
I'm in Virginia.
Where are you at in Virginia?
Woodbridge.
Okay, I lived in Williamsburg.
You lived in Williamsburg?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like about maybe half hour south of DC.
Okay, yeah, so we're like Townsend, Alexandria, like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably, I'm like 20 minutes from Alexandria.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, that's awesome. It's super cool, especially growing up on the West Coast where you just see all this stuff in your history books.
Yeah, like Old Town, all the colonial stuff, and like George Washington's house and all that.
Yeah, going to Mount Vernon and then going over to Monticello and seeing all that stuff in real life.
I wouldn't say, like, I haven't even been on the West Coast many times, but my cousin and I recently went to Vegas, and right after Christmas, and for whatever reason, we had to connect in San Francisco and then go back to Vegas for whatever reason. But I guess whatever the big airport is there, we were there briefly for like an hour and a half.
Oh, nice.
I don't remember the name. Maybe you can tell me. I mean,
of SFO or
is it just San Francisco? Is that the name of the airport? Like the
SFO. Yeah,
okay.
San Francisco International Airport. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the San Francisco airport and then Oakland, which is nice. I live in a big port city to where when I lived in Williamsburg, you had to go to Richmond to get out of anywhere. And then Richmond usually went through Philly or Charlotte.
Yeah.
So, but you always have those weird layovers sometimes. Like even in Seattle going to New York, sometimes you have a layover in Atlanta and you're just like, that doesn't make sense. But I guess that's the way the planes go.
Yeah, I know. It must have been like a route or something. I'm just like, we booked the flight. We're just like, okay, well, you know, We'll get 2 seats in the row, and naturally, because of the pandemic, if somebody's going to, because it was a flight where we could pick the seats, and like you would think, if you go to buy a ticket and you see 2 in a row are already taken, that third one wouldn't be purchased. Like
really?
It was the first flight we had a row to ourselves, and then the one from San Francisco to Vegas, like it was full.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh man, that's kind of like.
It's only an hour flight, but still.
Yeah, I was like, man, but it was cool though. I mean, it was nice that that was only my second time on the West Coast. Like years ago, when my sister was in the military, went out to San Diego for a week.
Oh, nice.
That's about it. 'Cause she was stationed in San Diego, but
yeah,
I love it out there though. Weather's much nicer.
Were you able to fly over? Like, did you see the mountains when you were going, or were you too high? Like, were you able to see the Rockies when you came through?
I saw a lot of good scenery. I mean, I wasn't at the window, but I was you know, peeking when I could.
Yeah. That's the cool thing is the Appalachian hills are cute, but they don't quite have it like the Rocky Mountains do. Like I lived in Williamsburg for a few years, and like, the weather is different, right? Like the extremes of humidity and then the cold, but then it snows and it's done like a day later.
Yeah, like Virginia weather is just stupid. Like last week it was like 70 one day, and then like a high of like 48 the next day, and it's just like no wonder, like, you know, no wonder people get sick so easily, just the constant weather change and the, so like when, how long, I want to say, how long have you been, doing stand up? Like what, like who are like your inspirations? Like when did you decide like, hey, I think I'm going to give this a shot?
Yeah, yes, it's kind of an awesome story actually. So I've been doing stand up, to answer your question, just about 2 years. It'll be 2 years next month. But the cool story about it is something to where even as a kid, like I've always been fascinated by comedy and like kind of enjoyed watching stand up, and there's totally different styles, right? So there's the ones that I kind of admire and look towards the most in terms of the ones that are the most popular is going to be things like the Jim Gaffigan, just storyteller, super calm, super monotone, but can take you through a journey in an hour and a half where you don't realize his premise has changed multiple times, right? So it's just, his story is fantastic. And then you have some of the other ones where you get into more of like Dane Cook, obviously known as just a massive performer. Like his jokes are good, but it's not nearly as poetic, other than his energy on the stage is just electric.
Yeah.
Being able to kind of look at that style, and then you look at Lewis Black, who's just constantly angry, and also has his own comedic style, versus Daniel Tosh, where he's just a little bit crass, but just calls it like it is.
Yeah.
So like looking at those, that's kind of something I've always enjoyed. And then actually about a year, or I guess in 2019, this woman on Nextdoor, like the app, like the neighborhood app, she was like, hey, I have a big birthday coming up. Happy to give stage time to any comedians or like slam poets or anything like that. And this guy was like, oh, I've like done shows at the big comedy clubs in San Francisco, just like name drop a few. And then he was like, I'll do your whole birthday for like $200. And this woman's like, I don't want to pay for it. Like, I just figured there's going to be an audience there and I'm willing to like pay it forward and like give a stage to somebody who wants to do it for free. So I messaged this woman and I was like, hey, I have no professional comedy experience. I generally make my friends laugh. It's something I'm interested in, but like you get what you pay for, kind of a thing. And she was like, hey, yeah. So we chatted. I met up with her for like a half hour just to put a face to a name, get to know a little bit more about her and her party. It was her 50th birthday. She did this whole like Jane Fonda fondue thing. And so I had a month to put together. She gave me a 10-minute set. I never knew how long 10 minutes was. So I had a month. I wrote my own set by myself, just with stuff that like entertained me, wrote it all out. Didn't really know much what I was doing, just as long as it made me laugh. I practiced it a few times and ended up lasting 6.5 minutes. And like from that high, I was like, this is really cool. So then I started doing research about it, talked to some friends, and kind of found San Francisco Comedy College here in the city, and started just going to classes and like learning a little bit more about the science behind joke structure and like how to perform better. And then since the pandemic hit, you're just able to hit shows so quickly and so easily now. Performing around the world, connecting you and I together in ways where we just didn't have that before when it was all in person. So,
it's like I love like the virtual aspect. Like you said, it's like instant.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I want to say I basically attended a comedy show from my bed in my pajamas.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It was cool, you know, but it's different, but it was still fun.
Yeah.
And, so she just gave you a change. You're like, look, I kind of want to try this. And she's like, all right, go for it.
Yeah. Within it, like, I learned a little bit more about her and like her friends, just to kind of like know what I was up against in terms of the potential audience style. And then, I had 10 minutes. I filmed it. It's on my YouTube channel. Cause I see my YouTube channel is like, this is me then. So I don't have enough followers to have a dedicated URL, but if you just look up Steven Steiner comedy on YouTube, you can see it. You can see my original set. Like my first set ever is my second set in front of an audience. I did one open mic just as like a stage fright thing. But now as you like see my journey in my comedy, you can see like I'm maturing as I go, and my jokes get better, my delivery gets better, my pacing gets better. But it's just a fun adventure to be able to like have that. To where originally I filmed it because my friends and family were like, Steven's doing comedy. Like, I want to see this. What? Can you film it? Because I'm here. My family's pretty much in the greater Seattle area, if not friends around the country, since of my little moving journey that we just talked about. It was a chance for me just to share with them. I was like, sure, why not? And then now having footage or having video allows me to get some gigs booked where they're like, oh yeah, do you have a clip? And it's like, yeah, sure. Like I didn't do that on purpose. Like I had no clue where my comedy journey was going to go. Yeah. Like I'll do someone's birthday. I'll mess around with it for a while. And then the high is fun. The ability to perform around the world. Like I did a show last weekend based out of Chicago, but then like the weekend before that, I did a show based out of Israel. So it was like 9 a.m. Pacific time. in order to hop on like I don't know, like 7 p.m. like Israel time show.
That's really cool though. I mean, I've wanted to talk about you ever like brain farts, like your brain just like shuts down? And like I hate that because I'm like I started off when I started this, I'm like I had like notes and stuff, but I found like it was just more comfortable to just let it flow, you know. It sounds less like I wanted to, because like your thing is like clean comedy, right?
Yeah.
And like when I like with you, like I've always loved, like for as long as I can remember now, well, I mean George Carlin wasn't really clean, but I mean I remember seeing like one of his specials like sometime in the 90s. I was definitely too young to be watching it, but I don't know, like I've always loved watching and listening to comedy or comedy movies, you know, and I remember when like Dane Cook was like coming up and like really big, like the whole Torgasm like era and stuff. And it's like you said, like his presence, like you said, it's electric, you know, like just how he is. And then I've like, what I like is I like a mix of everything. Like I like some of the inappropriate stuff. I also like clean stuff too. Like one of my favorites is Jerry Seinfeld. And I just like him personally, and I wanted to speak on, like, because for me, listening to a bunch of different stuff, like, it has to be harder to come up with clean material. It has to be, because it's so, and like, how do you just like maybe see something like out when you're out and about, or just something from your experience in life, or like how do you come up with something clean? Because I mean, like, of course, it'd be easy to just say, "Oh, well, you know, F this, F that, and this thing happened." You know what I mean? Like,
it's fascinating. I love this question because it definitely gives people a different perspective, right? So, how people define clean comedy can be up to individuals' perspective. For me personally, clean just means I don't use profanity in my delivery. It doesn't mean I don't enjoy crude or clean or like dirty jokes. It doesn't mean I don't swear with friends or family and off the mic, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, like when I thought about my comedy career and thought about getting into this as a hobby, it really brought me back into very similar to like Will Smith's story, where it's like Will Smith doesn't have to like cuss to sell records, as Eminem says it.
Mm-hmm.
Or like for me, knowing that I was going to potentially put myself out there on social media or like friends and family or cousins or people of all different ages, I didn't want them to feel like, when they listen to my stuff, right? Like I didn't want them to be like, oh, you can't listen to Steven, like whoever it is, like Steven on comedy, like is not your style. So we're like live in person. I know if I'm talking to a kid versus an adult, and like friends and family, you might change your tone. So on stage, I purposely do not use any profanity in the way that I convey myself. It doesn't mean I don't make sexual innuendos in some of my jokes. It doesn't mean that you can't read between the lines and like pick up on some of the crudeness that might be in there.
Yeah.
But I don't
it's like, you're not like cursing just for the sake of it. You're not just like
using an F-bomb as a punchline.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm using a redirection or something else that's not just straight anger. And like, even to the point where some people who like, when I'm doing workshops and riffing with friends and stuff, they're like, oh, it'd be really funny if you dropped an F-bomb right here. Like if you did this, and it's like, I'm just not going to. Like, I don't think I need to do that. Like, sure, I'll make sex jokes and like, I'll make some references about different things.
Yeah.
But using profanity as a way to hit a punchline, to me, just, I don't think is needed.
Yeah. I mean, it's even like looking back at, and I watched one special, on Netflix, and I won't say the comedian's name, not like they're going to hear this, but I mean,
you don't know, man.
But it was like just dirty from start to finish. And like, I didn't like that. I'm like, that's, you know,
sometimes that's their audience, right? Like there's definitely comedians who like they've made a brand out of it.
Yeah, true.
So
I mean, it's just
the way to communicate. Like it doesn't have to, like, as I said, Lewis Black is somebody who like, he doesn't really swear, but like, he's just angry. Like that's his slant. And like, he just rants to where like you talked about Jerry Seinfeld, like Jerry Seinfeld is obviously one of the OGs in the field also. And it's like, it's observational comedy. Like he just annihilates something in so many different ways that you're just like, I've never looked at it in that way. So his jokes are true and believable, and they're not
And I've had other conversations too. Like I'm just saying, like that's my opinion. Like I know it's all subjective, just like music. You know, it's just like that. Like it's just when I'm listening, I'm like, oh, I'm like, yeah, parts of this are funny, but like, oh, that's just not my style. Like you know, I'm like, ugh, I can't.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like there's definitely like even when I do some of these shows with the set list, you're like, yeah, some comedians people think are hilarious, and they're just not my type of humor.
Yeah,
that's a good parallel what you said with music. Like just because there's an entire industry of music that people love doesn't mean that it's for everybody. And as generic as you get, there are going to be some jokes that land with a larger population than others. But
yeah,
definitely people who like have found their niche. That's like, yeah, that's their crowd, and they can sell out arenas doing humor that I wouldn't necessarily pay to go see.
Yeah. So like after you did that first like set, like, so did you get like a pretty positive response from it? And you said like afterwards you're just like, oh yeah, I have to do this because this was just.
Yeah. So after that set, friends and family, like those are really the ones other than like the audience there, right? So it's a complete stranger.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't know what she was signing up for. She didn't I didn't have a brand at that point. I didn't have any sort of jokes that now at this point, I got a show tonight and I can hop on and do like a 7 to 10 minute set without having to really prep for it. But this was like 10 minutes. I had no clue how much 10 minutes really was.
Yeah.
And then making the jokes, like, yeah, the feedback was good. Like I was getting laughs there. And then as I shared it with people, it seemed to go well. Some of those jokes I look back on, I'm like, yeah, they're still funny. And some of them was like, that wasn't even a joke, but I guess it was entertaining to me at the time. As you learn to like tighten stuff up and learn what makes it funny. But it just was a thing to where I enjoyed it. I'm generally somebody who enjoys just looking at opportunities to kind of help others. Mm-hmm. And comedy is just another flavor to do that. So you can be a teacher, you can be a mentor, or you can just share laughter. And I enjoy the spotlight, so it's a way for me to continue to do that.
So I were you like nervous leading up to it? Like, how did you prepare? Like, did you, were you like practicing it several times a day leading up to it? Or were you just like, oh, I've just got a few things, I'm just going to go up and try it?
For that first set, a lot of it was writing. So it's one of those things where I just open up a Google Doc or I would text myself random thoughts. And I still do that now. But at the time, like not having a rhythm or a practice of it, I just would riff on ideas and be like, okay, here's a premise. What can I do with it? And I'm using words now that I've like done comedy for 2 years. I know how to talk about it. But at the time I was like, here's an idea that's super vague that I think could be funny.
Yeah.
That I just find entertaining. Like, for example, one of my early jokes was just around like in San Francisco, right? So tourists want to ride the cable car. San Francisco is notoriously known for the cable car. But to me as a local, they just pay $7 a pop to ride a car that's cheaper if I just took the bus. And it's like literally they're paying $7 a pop just to film me walking down the street. Like I can do that by sticking my hand out the window of a bus. So like stuff like that, to where then it's also like when I go home to my mom has a convertible that I get to drive, right? So like, yeah, it's her midlife crisis car. It's a 2-door Volkswagen Bug. So like me as a 30-year-old guy with a beard driving around in a 2-door Volkswagen Bug, I generally am able to get away with what I want because they think it's either a midlife crisis woman or like a teenager in her first car until I pass them on the freeway and they look over and they're like, wait, what?
That's
I just take it.
So you're just literally turning like just real life stuff because just talking about it, generally describing it as funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Like because I've always wondered, because I ask every comedian this, like, how do you, because it just fascinates me. Like, I'm told I'm funny when I'm not trying to be. Like, I can't imagine being funny and like trying to be, you know what I mean? Like writing stuff like that, just like, I'm like, how do you even do that? Like,
yeah, once like doing it for 2 years now, I've gotten more into like the setup punch and like figuring out joke structure. And there's plenty of great books or classes that you can take to like get into it. But early on, like my first set was literally just me being like, what do I find funny? And it's like, yeah, a 30-year-old guy with a beard driving a 2-door Volkswagen Bug and like setting it up with you in the way it's like, yeah, I go home and like I get out of my mom's second car because apparently I'm not good enough to drive the first.
Yeah.
Right. Like I get the midlife crisis convertible. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, sweet. Like it's probably a Corvette or something like really cool. And it's like, no, it's a Bug. Like that, like, so that, like that forming of a joke structure to me without knowing the science behind it was like, oh yeah, you keep building towards the unexpected. And as I'm like, oh yeah, second car, cause I'm not good enough for the first, like, oh, it's like, that's
And then you're just like, it's a bug.
Yeah, like, come on, guys.
Because
Like,
you hear a two-door convertible, like, oh, what's he driving? Then you say, bug. It's a bug.
Like, it's a bug. Yeah, the one that's usually owned by midlife crisis women or like preteen.
Yeah.
Like not me. So like when I'm passing somebody on the freeway in this bug, I usually get like cut people off because they're like, oh, that's cute. Like they're learning how to drive. Or like the thing with the cable cars where it's like, yeah, literally like me just walking to work, I'd be passed by tourists like filming their ride on a cable car. It's like, so they're paying $7 a pop to like film me walking down the street. It's like, cool.
So you're literally like I could see like you're literally taking just literally something that actually happened to you.
Yeah.
And you may be adding a little thing here and there, or maybe just how you tell the story or how you tell, I guess, the situation. That's what makes it funny.
It's a lot of it is, it's reinterpretation. So like, I don't actually really take the bus that often. But if I do like the concept of like, I'm not sticking my hand out the bus to like film my view, but that stretching the truth to where people believe it is like, now that I've gotten more comfortable with what I'm doing, half of my jokes could be a complete lie, but it doesn't matter because it's still a joke.
Yeah, exactly.
For example, another thing that I get into is like, now one of my fun jokes is like during the pandemic, like I moved in with a woman recently. Yeah, my mom. So like that joke,
it's how you tell it. It's how you say it.
Yeah, and I moved in with my girlfriend recently. Is the truth behind it, but like that's not funny, right? Like the funny part is that like, oh yeah, he moved in with a girl. Like you probably expected it to be like a significant other of some sort, and then the reinterpretation is like, oh yeah, my mom, and then people are like, oh, that's cute, and you're like, no, it's cool, but it makes dating really weird.
I've also like wondered like I don't really get into them a lot, but I'll get into like. Or I used to get into like awkward situations or just like living near DC. Like I used to like my old job, I used to have to ride the metro a lot.
Yeah.
And was just going, I think it was going to work, and I met up with my coworker on the metro train, and there's just semi crazy looking lady, like she was dressed normally like a, wearing normal clothes. She didn't look like she didn't look ragged or anything. And she gave us a weird look, and she's like, "Is this the train that goes to this stop?" And we're like, and I'm like, "I think so. I think because I don't like know. I just knew where I was going."
Yeah.
And she realized she was on the wrong train, and she like went off on us. She's
As
like,
if it's your fault.
Yeah. She was like, "You told me it was the right train." And we're like, "No, we didn't. Sorry." And she just like. I'm like, oh, I need to go sit somewhere else because this is really uncomfortable.
And like that's where humor comes from, as long as you're able to tell the story in a way that like is there. We're also on like we have our equivalent called BART, like the Bay Area Rapid Transit, and there's a sign in BART that says "Don't ride your bike on the train," and it's like, but somebody had to have tried that in order for it to become a rule.
Exactly.
So like being able to reinterpret, like what was that like in the environment where somebody actually tried to ride their bike on the train?
That's so fun. That's so funny.
Like you try to envision, it's like being able to pay attention to that stuff and like see what's going on around me in a way to where it's like, that's interesting.
That's so funny. So like before the pandemic, obviously are you able to, at least, well now, I mean, before the pandemic, were you able to like perform like fairly regularly? I mean, I'm not exactly sure what clubs are out your way, like on the West Coast, like.
Yeah, so the San Francisco has a really good comedy scene, actually. So before the pandemic, I wasn't really as invested in doing comedy. I did the class. So at the end of every class, like at the end of every 5 weeks, we did a grad show, which was essentially all of us had stage time at a local bar. So like we invited friends and family and like had to pack the house there, and that was it. I didn't really do much else. I didn't really try to hit open mics. I wasn't really like in it in that way. I did a couple, but I didn't feel enough confidence.
Yeah.
But then since the pandemic, like being able to hop on these Zoom shows and being able to like bomb and then just like leave the Zoom and never see half those people again, it helps. So like now, like you can do multiple shows. March for me is actually a super packed month in terms of shows and recording these types of things with you. But it's like, you kind of take what you feel. And then now that things are starting to open back up again, like on Tuesday, so a couple days ago, I just did an outdoor show for the first time in the second wave of reopening. So it's just outdoors, like a patio, and then
that seems really fun though.
Yeah,
like, I see like videos and pictures of these outdoor shows. I'm like, hey, getting it done. However,
yeah. So it's fun. It's fun to be able to do that and just be able to share the laughs without the delay.
Yeah, but I imagine too, it's also probably a lot less pressure when you can just jump on something like this, like you said. Then you can just hit the X as soon as you're done, and then just be out of it. I imagine that's a good way to practice too.
Yeah, it's a good way. It's fun. It's different in the sense that like they always tell you to practice how you perform, right? So like when you're performing in a live setup, you're generally holding onto a mic or have something. So without that, I don't perform with a mic. Like you actually have a mic, which is great. I just use my computer speakers, so then I'm able to like use my hands to do different things that add energy in a way that's like I generally talk that way. So doing that live is like trying to figure out how to use that as a part of me. Like I want to come across as clean, but then also like silly and fun to where you want to be able to like watch what I'm going to do next and not just listen all the time.
Like I think too, like using like a lot of the hands like that, very energetic, and I think that like that's something that could like make you stand out. Like you really don't see that a lot. I'd probably be more inclined to watch somebody who's like doing a lot like with their hands. Yeah. Like I imagine, like you said, like it could probably help a lot of the jokes too. Like if you're being very animated about it, and I mean, is that like your thought process behind it? That you said that's just generally how you talk. Like when you're talking to someone, you're like throwing your hands up a lot, and
they tell you a lot when you get started in comedy, and even as people who do it for years, there's like you just have to find what's natural to you, and then kind of own that. So to me, what becomes natural is this like over animated, like just enthusiastic part of it, to where naturally, like even under the table, you can't see it off the camera, but like I'm sitting here like going like this, like I'm just like in it.
Yeah.
So like that's just a part of who I am. I don't fake it. I might bring the energy level a few notches higher than I would like just kick it with my friends.
Oh yeah.
But it's nothing fake, right? Like I'm not a completely different person off the mic, other than on the mic, my comedy persona, which is fun, is like a 30-year-old guy who's struggling to date. When I'll get off the stage and like introduce my girlfriend to like my buddies who showed up, or like whoever shows up to they're like, did you just do a joke about being single? Like, how does your girlfriend think about that? It's like, oh, she helped me write it. Like, it's like, I just don't need to talk about my personal life on stage in that way. Like there's some stuff that I'll talk about, like my heritage and my family, and like make jokes about my parents and stuff. But like my personal life within dating, it's like, it's just not something that I need to expose on stage.
Yeah. And some are comfortable with that. And
you don't know what's true, right? Like my entire comedy persona is a struggling 30-year-old guy who doesn't know how to date. So I talk about like, unfortunately I don't have any bad dating stories though, because I'm their worst.
I saw that on your Instagram. That's one of the first things I saw that like made me laugh. It's hilarious because like, yeah, I agree. Like if I were doing it, I would totally leave the personal stuff out of it. I'd be like in the same boat as you. Like there's no need to go into that. But then like you said, they're jokes. I mean, theoretically, they, like you said, they don't have to be true.
Yeah.
Like you could just totally make something up. Yeah. And like if it's funny,
comedy is about laughing, right? It's not about like, you're not here for a science experiment.
Exactly. Like when I'm somebody, like when I'm talking to someone, like I can't not move my hands.
Yeah.
And it's just, I can't just sit still and just have the hands on the table and I have to at least be kind of like doing this as I'm talking.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why, like I get it. My mom does it. Like everybody in my family does it. I think it's like a hereditary thing or whatever, but I don't know. Like I literally can't just, like if I were to sit there and just put my hands in my pockets, like I couldn't do it. Like I have to be moving my hands.
And it affects your delivery too. Like I've even heard interviews with ventriloquists where they're like, if the ventriloquist doesn't have the puppet on their hand, they can't do that puppet's voice, which it's like, I mean, technically that's a variable, right? But the fact it's like, it's all naturally them, but they cannot get into character of that puppet without taking on the persona of that puppet on their hand.
That's crazy. So it's like
weird, but it's believable.
Like a connection type thing, like an association or whatever.
Yeah. So like being able to talk, like trying to be upset or angry or happy without using your hands definitely impacts your voice, which should be naturally unconnected, but that's just human contact. Like that's how we interact.
So like, you said you were always like texting yourself ideas, writing ideas down. Are you like pretty much writing stuff or thinking of stuff every single day and adding?
Yeah. I'm always kind of riffing on stuff to where what'll generally happen is like, if I come up with a premise, like I generally just try to entertain myself. So what I've learned with my comedy journey is if I find it entertaining, other people will also most of the time. But that's not always true. So there's generally like, if I come up with something that I think is funny, I was like, oh, I need to work on that. It's like, oh, let's like riff on it out loud.
Yeah.
My own entertainment. And then if I think it's good enough, I have like a few buddies that I'll just like send stupid ideas to. Right. Like my family or whoever, like there's just a few people that I'm just like, I've built a relationship with them. They're not in my comedy bubble at all, but it's like, oh, here's a funny thought. Sometimes they'll riff on it. Sometimes they'll add to it. Sometimes they're just like, yeah, no, try again. And you're just like, cool. So like, that's where I'll text myself. I'll come up with stuff. Early on, I was all about having to write it down. And then I've learned as I've evolved that my style is less about being the writer and more about being the performer. So it's kind of like there's 4 different like main ways of communicating in comedy. And I've definitely seen that I'm more of like the performer and the storyteller. So sometimes it just requires me to like trying it again and again and again, and then be like, oh, that landed better. Or like, where is the pause on that? Or where is the humor to where you as the audience can pick up on that's supposed to be the punchline.
Yeah.
Versus like, is he done yet?
So like, are things seem to be, do things seem to be getting better out there in terms of like pandemic, and are some places opening back up? You know, like you said, you did an outdoor show and
yeah. In terms of the pandemic, it's getting better. So San Francisco still has a lot of people to go through the vaccinations and so forth. So I'm not going to get it anytime soon, not because I don't want it, but because demand is higher than my healthy young age is in the spectrum to get it. But right now we're at a spot to where restaurants or indoors dining is like limited capacity. I think it's like 10% or so right now. Outdoor dining, patios, they basically across the sidewalks, they've taken like the parallel parking spots and built the whole parklet stuff. So there's outdoor dining. Some parklets appear safer than others, but it's all your own comfort level, right? So you can walk by the sidewalk and see people with their masks off drinking. And it's like, that's not quite my scene, versus the ones that might be a little bit more like each table is sectioned off with a barrier wall. And you're like, okay, like I might feel safer there. So just like how you probably are experiencing, everyone's got their own level of comfort.
Yeah.
Accept that.
I remember being like, when this started, like, you know, some people were wearing masks, some weren't. They're like, I don't know how serious this is. I don't, you know, and then
the entire world's shut down about a year ago.
Yeah. And I can't believe it's basically been a year. Like, that's crazy. Like, I don't know where this year went. Yeah, like, I really don't. And going back to like the Zoom thing, like I just think it's so cool because, like you said, and another comic said this to me, like it's just amazing. You can just do this show, you know, and you could talk to someone like in another country, literally.
Yeah.
You just click a link and just you're there.
Yeah, hop on. Like it's crazy. To where like in terms of around the world, like I said the show based out of Israel. I've done 2 shows based out of South Africa. I've done a show based out of France and London, and then like all over the US. And it's just time zones are just the thing to compare against. I try not to double book it to where I've seen some comedians where they'll like do their set or like be at the beginning of one show and the end of another so they can hop mid show. To me, I think that's just disrespectful to the show itself, right? Like, yeah, cool. Like my time, I'm out. It's like at least hang out for the rest of the set. So I try not to overlap double booking shows. But some people are just on a grind where like they'll do 3 shows a night, and I'm just like, holy smokes, that's exhausting.
I just think, I don't know. It's just cool. It's a good way for people to connect. You know, in my opinion, because when I when the pandemic hit and I decided to start this, I just like dove headfirst, kind of like when I love discovering like new indie bands.
Oh,
like,
cool.
And I like a lot of mainstream stuff, but I like, listeners of this artist also listen to, and like going, and that's just what I've been doing. Like we follow a lot of the same people, and that's how I've been discovering a lot of, bigger, like more popular comedians, but like that's how I love just discovering people I've never heard of or people who haven't been doing it a super long time, and it's a way for me to get to know, because for one, it's not like some gigantic mega star is going to do this. And
somewhere, right? Like it's all about building clout for yourself.
Yeah, and it's it's an easy way to do this, because everything's on Zoom now, and it was an easy way to start this. And it's, hey, willing to do this. All you have to do is click a link, you don't gotta be like, oh, are you in this city this weekend? Come by this address, you know what I mean? It'll be nice to eventually do these in person.
Sure.
That's the end goal, but
Cool part about this too now is that we're able to meet people to like, oh, hey, if I'm in the DC area again, it'll be like, oh, Larry, like, what's up? Or like, there's a few people that I met in Chicago. Like, so many people have been building friendships now who have never met face to face just because of the access to being on the same shows a lot or following the same people a lot. And you're just like, oh, I've seen that name a lot now, like helping each other out. So it's cool to be able to build friendships in a way that like our paths might have crossed as strangers, but there would be a weird engagement to make that something more.
Yeah, like I've had like a few like, oh, well, when you're ever here, let me know and we'll get you in or something like that. And
yeah,
not everyone's doing that, but I mean, I've had some say that. I'm like, that's really cool. So I mean, I look at it as I'm trying to build relationships too.
Sure,
because you never know. I mean,
yeah, 100%. Like it's simply the way that I've learned it before, actually from a professional mentor that I have. He always tells me to build advocates because you never know. Right. Like always build advocates for yourself. And then it comes full circle eventually. So it's like, oh yeah, like let's go kick it during my lunch break with Larry for 45 minutes. Like, I don't know where it's going to go, but it's brand recognition for me eventually. And whoever listens to your podcast, and it's a chance for us to build a relationship between us if nothing else happens.
And the way I look at it is like, no matter who I have on here or whatever, there's going to be someone who's never heard a name.
Yeah.
There's going to be at least one person. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
Someone's going to listen to this. Like someone's going to listen to this. Like I've got the Instagram for the podcast and I have my personal one. And I'm like, on the podcast when like the followers are growing very slowly. So I'm trying to promote it on my personal one too. And I'm like, it'll come in time. There's only so much I can do.
And that's a lot of it too, is like now when this episode's live, like let me know and I'll share it also. Right.
Oh, yeah.
It's tracing it back to where then the way that I've been able to find a lot of my shows, like early on, I was hustling a few Facebook groups, but now I've got to the point to where I just keep following stuff on Instagram. And then I'm like, oh, like trace that back to the producer of that show and then shoot them an IM. That's just like, hey, how do you book comedians? I'm interested in the spot. And some of them are like, yeah, let's just schedule time and do it. Some people are like, oh, we usually do auditions first and then get you on the main show, but you don't know until you ask the question.
Oh yeah. And I mean,
somebody talks to me and it's like, well, cause you didn't put out the effort to let people know that you want to be talked to.
And it's, like, and Instagram is like my preferred method. Like that's where I've just been looking up and discovering, and
that's awesome.
And it's just, I'm not picky at all. I don't discriminate, as long as I see you're a comedian, this goes for everybody, and then there's something visually for me to watch or read, and I can say, okay, that's funny, then I'm golden. That's all I need. Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's all I need.
Yeah, I just looked it up. I just checked our chain because I never remember like if I reached out first or not. But yeah, the fact that you reached out first is like clearly there was enough in my account where you're like, oh yeah, I want to talk to this guy, which is sweet. Like that's what it's all about, is self-marketing, self-promotion, and then hoping that somebody follows the conversation. I remember it was only like a month ago when the first person reached out to me to be like, hey, I want you on my show. And I was like, wait, what? Like, people are actually coming to me now? Like, what did I do right? Because for the longest time, like I was just hustling, but you got to hustle to get recognition. So the fact that like you, and then, like I said, like a month ago, the first person reached out to me to put me on their show. And I took a screenshot of that. Like they don't know that they were the first person to reach out to me, but I was like, yes, please.
That's awesome though. I mean,
a couple bucks on her set. So, or like on her show.
Yeah. Like I'm like, okay, I'm going to start this because, I had started like listening to other podcasts, and I'm like, cause I love just comedy so much. Like maybe I can try this. I'm going to just start messaging people. I don't know how it's going to go,
That's
but thankfully I haven't got a single no yet.
Wow.
But I've had a few that have been read and never got a reply, but I understand that's going to happen. I'm not taking it personally.
Absolutely.
And then it's like, man, and then like I'll be like hitting it hard, then I'll kind of run out of steam a little bit, then I'm like, I gotta just keep going. I mean, it's
self-care is important. Like you're gonna get a lot in the can, and then you'll just be like, cool, I'm gonna, like, for me, February was a slow month, and I was like, January hit it hard, February I'll recharge, and then March I have a bunch of shows booked, and it's like eventually it's exhausting, right? Just like it's your day job or whatever. Like we have to be our own agent. Like you're out there booking people, so then you have to do the recordings, and there's probably post-recording editing and anything else that kind of completes the package for you. So I respect that hustle.
And it's just, it's like, man, it's easy, but it's not at the same time. Like it's fun and all that. I'm like, man, like I don't think like, like some of these like bigger comedians, like, oh, it must be nice to like have a lot of money and have like a team that does this stuff for you. I mean, that
level of work.
Yeah, that must be nice. But I mean, just like, oh, I gotta, huh?
Have you read the Steve Martin book? I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it's like his comedy biography or autobiography of like his comedy journey.
No, I haven't.
It's super good. I recommend you check it out if you're into it. I don't remember exactly the name, but if you just look up like Steve Martin's biography about comedy, he basically talks about like, in the beginning, like he hustled hard. And then he got to the point to where he still is extremely famous, but at some point he was like top of the game. Like he was the comedian. He was selling out all over the place.
Yeah.
And he talks about like, he gets pretty personal around like how it just wasn't fun for him anymore. Like, because it becomes just a routine and you're just like every day you're just on a different show. You don't even know what city you're in anymore. Like everyone's booking his shows, but he's what they're paying for. So he has to show up every night and perform at a level to the expectations of the audience. And it's just like, it doesn't become fun anymore because it's just exhausting.
Yeah. Like going back to what I was going to say, like before we start to wrap up, like I've been doing this since September when in theory that's not that long. It's still brand new and it's going to be brand new for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's just so many podcasts on the market, but I'm such a big fan of comedy. I'm like, this is what I want to do. I'm like, it can't be just me by myself talking. That ain't going to work.
Because you get recognition through us, right? So like, as you have guests, like we're going to promote ourselves through you.
Yeah.
You through us. And we both benefit from that, which is why that's probably why a lot of us are like happy to hop on with you to just be like, hey, yeah, like let's kick it. Cause it's recognition to where, as you said, one person who doesn't know me yet is going to hear this episode and hopefully it works to their benefit. Like, how does this clean comedy make it work? Like, let's look at more of those, like watch a few tracks and you don't know where it's going to go. Like you might get one of those big names and be like, I can't believe so-and-so signed on to do my show. And look back at yourself and be like, yeah, that's because I hustled. And that's awesome.
And it's, and I've had people tell me like, hey, just imagine if, anybody, any of the comics, could basically end up blowing up at any time. Yeah. And then you can say you had them on.
Yeah, you had them before they were cool.
But I mean, it's also like, it's a good way to, I guess, for me to get to know them and to kind of bring spotlight to them, like, hey, I discovered this comic and I think they're funny and hey, And plus I love learning more about the whole process too, just because I'm so fascinated.
Are you doing your own comedy? Like, are you ever going to get on a stage or on a virtual set?
Oh, no.
Come on, dude, let's do it. I'll work with you to create like 3 minutes of material. You could hit an open mic, you could bomb it, and then get that adrenaline high. Be like, I can do better. Let's do it. If you're down, I'm down to do it. I actually run although our time zones are different, but every Wednesday night, I get a couple of my comedy buddies together and we just help each other out. Like we just work on bits, we practice material. If you want any help on that, like you're clearly learning a lot. I mean, you're doing this for months now, so you're probably learning a lot about the comedic style. It's like, just write your thoughts down.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, since I've got into it, like, since I've really got into it, I'm like, man, like, I wish I could do that.
You totally can.
You
just have to want to do it.
Oh, screw it. Why not?
Do it. Hit me up later if you want. Larry, I'm serious. If you want to work on, like, learn basic joke premise, we can kick it for another time. If you want to do it live so people on your podcast can listen to how Larry writes jokes, why not record the journey?
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't even, that could be an idea for up and coming, but yeah, I don't even know how to begin, but I'm definitely interested. I'm at least willing to try it, Yeah,
that's all it is. Like, you can do, if you can talk on a mic, you can deliver a joke. It's just learning what that joke might be. So yeah, let's do it. Write down stuff that you find funny. Let's schedule a second recording and we'll turn it into a 101 joke structure of Larry writing his first set.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. Let's do it. I'm down. I'm serious. I'm kind of excited now.
Yeah, you can totally do it if you want. Like, you're obviously inspired and somewhat intimidated by us as comedians, but we were in your shoes. We just chose to take the next step.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I will definitely let you know.
All right.
Totally serious. I'll let you get back to your meetings.
Yeah, I got to do the day job, I guess. Something's got to pay because comedy's not.
It will eventually, though.
Hey, I've gotten paid enough, so I'm a professional comedian. It just doesn't do much besides buy something off the dollar menu.
Well, that's good. Thank you so much for doing this. It was great meeting you.
You too.
And this will be out next Friday.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, just let me know
Next
and I'll
Friday.
share it. I'll promote it for you, and then we'll put a spoiler about when you want to work on writing your own material.
All righty. All right, thanks, man.
All right, thank you, Larry.
Thanks. Have a good one. That concludes this week's episode of Life Say Bit with Larry Mullins. Please follow the podcast on all social media at Life Say Bit Pod. If you're listening, please follow, rate, subscribe, and write a review. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. And tell your friends. While you're at it, please follow Steven on Instagram at Steven Steiner Comedy. Everybody, thank you so much for all the support, and I'll catch you on the next one.